The Minnesota Wild have made a shocking move as they have finally extended Marco Rossi and avoided a holdout here. We're going to be breaking this contract down, going over what it means, and also going over what this means going forward and what the Minnesota Wild's next move is going to be. Ladies and gentlemen, we have some very good news here today, and I'm going to be breaking it all down for you. If you're looking for a spot for all of your Minnesota Wild news, you're in the right spot. Hit the sub button, join me here on the channel. We're covering everything Minnesota Wild, and now that we got this done, it's time to move on to bigger and better things. But like I said, before we do jump in, 91% of you guys watching right now not subscribed to the channel, be sure to do so. We're going to have it all here for you guys. But let's get straight in, because obviously we've been waiting for months and months and months for this extension. And coming in here from Marco Rossi, the man who yesterday kind of broke the news, said that something was imminent, something was coming in the coming days, and he was right. Today, the Minnesota Wild have avoided a holdout and signed Marco Rossi to a 3-year, $15 million contract, and the sources, of course, are Marco Rossi and Joe Smith. Now, this contract is exactly what we expected and exactly what Marco Rossi said yesterday. Now, going back on what's expected, I should say expected from yesterday. Now, remember, going through this contract entirely, we were seeing upwards of $10 million. Numbers that were never going to be achievable for Marco Rossi in specific. We knew, and I've voiced this in my videos, that we were going to see a contract 100% below what Matt Boldy was making. If Matt Boldy was making $9 million, then we may be seeing a $7 million deal, but there is no way that Bill Guerin was giving Marco Rossi a more expensive contract than Matt Boldy. That was guaranteed. That was something that, was very much in the fine print, but not really said exactly how it is. But coming into this contract, obviously, now we have an absolute steal, and I'm willing to say that. And you're taking a look at this deal, $5 million a year for 3 years, and we're going to jump into what could come next regarding Marco Rossi here in a few moments. But this came out from Dom Lashinzin on The Athletic, and also kind of taking a look at this. When you're looking at his deal and his market value at 7.7, we were given really two options, which was a full, 7.7 by 7-8 years, whatever was going on there, or the more likely option, as we figured out as of late, and the one that actually came to fruition, a bridge deal at 3 by 5.5 was around the number that we were seeing. And of course, now a 3 by 5 is an absolute steal of a deal, especially when you're looking at Marco Rossi as a player who's been so, not just efficient as of last year, but just such a player that was taking the Wild by surprise, playing all 82 games, being such a consistent player, playing on the first line, second line, wherever he's needed. And ultimately, we know that what happened in the playoffs was something that he was not happy with. Us as fans were really not happy with. And he voiced his frustration to John Hynes there at the end of the season and going into the postseason meetings with the coach and players. And that's where we really started to see this holdout. But as a offensive rating of plus 3.3 and a defensive rating of plus 1.9 with overall plus 5.2, he's been a player that really has just excelled in every capability, in every set that you put Marco Rossi in. Now, using this chart as well as going over to his JFresh chart, when you're taking a look at him here, listed his time on ice as a first liner, of course, going from last season, the injuries to just about everybody. I feel like, there's no point in naming out every single player, but Matt Boldy, Marco Rossi be the only two players to play 82 games. You're seeing a pretty solid set of numbers for someone who jumped into the first line, really kind of excelled in that position, but was not really expected to start the season there, especially with Joel Eriksson Ek. Now, what we did end up seeing and kind of the way that his play style evolved, he would be really solid on that first line. Of course, I think that there's options to flip-flop him and Joel Eriksson Ek. Joel Eriksson Ek, much more defensive center, which, of course, would fit a little bit better on the first line with Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Boldy, two very offensive players, but also excelling really good in defense and actually surprisingly being some of the better players in the NHL on the offensive side of the puck at defense. But Marco Rossi is going to play a huge role for this Wild team. And we're going to kind of jump in as well to what the next steps may be for this and what could possibly come out of it, because I think that Marco Rossi definitely has still a bit of frustration with this Minnesota Wild team. He wanted to return. Bill Guerin wanted him to return. Bill Guerin was saying that, hey, I'm going to match any offer sheet that comes my way. Anything that comes towards Marco Rossi, we're going to match it no matter what. We want him back, but we just need to figure something out. Now, going into this, we know that Bill Guerin really isn't the biggest fan of this play, the stature, I guess we could say, of Marco Rossi. He loves his play style, loves everything about him, but the fact that he is a smaller center, we know that's not really Bill Guerin's cup of tea, and that's where a lot of trade reports came out. Of course, we've been seeing the Vancouver Canucks in on just about everything, and right now, I'm counting that out. However, down the line is something that we can really kind of come back to and think of it as another option. Now, this is from Michael Russo's Athletic article saying that Rossi does not have a no trade protection on his contract, of course, as he is not yet eligible for any. And this is a big point of, kind of not concern for Marco Rossi, but a lot of interest for them, the Wild, both parties on the side of things. And we've been able to see some very interesting things because now we come down to a season where Marco Rossi is going to be taking kind of a new role here, see how he plays, and if he can keep up that pace and up the point production that he did last year, he'd be a great option to extend once again at the end of the 3 years. And that's one thing that the Wild are pretty confident in doing. Marco Rossi thinks he's worth more. The Wild, at this point, at this juncture, thinks he's probably a little bit less or what he's making currently. But that opinion may sway in a couple of years' time. If he starts to put up, 100-plus point seasons, that's where things could get a little bit better. And also offering him that new contract could be a very interesting thing in 3 years' time. And I feel like we know at this point how fast contracts go by. It feels like only yesterday Kirill Kaprizov signed his deal to stay with the Minnesota Wild, his 5-year deal. But coming down to it now, we're entering his final year, and we're going to kind of touch on that a little bit as well later. But this comes out from Michael Russo as well in a response to his tweet yesterday, saying that a contract was coming out very soon. And someone replied, give him 3 years and hopefully his value increases, then trade him. And Michael Russo just said, yep, straight up, nothing added to this, nothing else, no other, additives to this, just says yes. So could this be the Minnesota Wild's master plan? I don't want to ask a question here because I think that we're kind of seeing what the plan for Bill Guerin has been. I think he wants him to play for this team, get better, up that trade value, and if they can actually go out and get some of the players that they were looking at here, while Marco Rossi's value was not necessarily lower, but lower than what it will be in a couple of years' time, I think the Wild have really played a good set of cards here into this season, and wondering what could come next for this team, I think, is the big question, especially as we're seeing Kirill Kaprizov being here on a future extension, as well as coming into a big contract year for a few other players as well. Now, I do want to pull up the lines once again before we do jump into a bit of Kirill Kaprizov here, of the updates that we have, but putting Marco Rossi here currently listed as a second-line center. Now, as I mentioned, I think him, Joel Eriksson Ek could really kind of switch around here no matter what the situation is. You're looking for more offense, put Marco Rossi on the first line, but Joel Eriksson Ek has a really good fit with Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Boldy, and I don't think that's something that they want to change overly, too much. But having Marco Rossi on the second line, even though he can really play first line minutes wherever you want him to, I think he will need a new left winger. I don't think Marcus Johansson is really able to keep up anymore with that line of Matt Zuccarello, who at 37, still very, very quick, still very, very fast. But Marco Rossi is going to be needing another sharpshooter, I think, on that line. He's a very good playmaker, so I'm curious to see what goes down now that they finally have Marco Rossi here and ready to go. But going in, of course, to taking a look at the cap projections over the next few seasons. And this is where things get a bit more interesting for Kirill Kaprizov, for, of course, whatever's going to happen this season. And firstly, $4 million, 4.4, I should state, because that extra $400,000 can be very useful. That's what they have left over right now heading into next season. Now, would they be able to make a swing a trade, anything that will get a left winger for your second line for around 4.4? 100%. I think that's pretty something. That's something that they can pretty much easily do with that money. But will they actually do it? Will they try and get someone inside? Of course, Danil Yurov is going to be here in this lineup somewhere. So whether or not they kind of switch around Danil Yurov, maybe put him on the wing rather than playing center, or maybe moving Ryan Hartman up and play Danil Yurov on the third line center. The Wild are given a lot of opportunity here, so that's one thing I don't think they're going to be rushing into as much. Now, heading into next season, of course, Kirill Kaprizov going to be looking for that extension. We've been seeing numbers upwards of $15 million. Having a $39 million left over next season in cap space is going to be a major, major bonus for them. They can easily do it, and as we've been seeing, Bill Guerin's waiting for Kirill Kaprizov to get back from Moscow to have in-person conversations. Reports are saying, they're pretty close. Obviously, things are all lining up well. They both want to stay here. Of course, Kirill Kaprizov does. There's no way the Wild want him to leave. So things are looking in the right direction, and I expect something to be done as well before the season, or before the start of the regular season, I will say. So let me know what you think about this whole extension. Finally done. We can move on to bigger and better things, but I think this is just a big bonus for the Wild here, heading into another important season. So let me know what you think. That's all I got in this video. If you did enjoy it, give it a like, hit the sub button as well. I'm signing out, though. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.